As the revolution approached, paintings demonstrating themes of allegiance to state rather than to family began to abound. Although it was painted 5 years before the revolution, David's Oath of the Horatii would become one of the great images of the time. The theme of the Horatii is a sacrificial oath of allegiance to Republican Rome. It is taken by 3 brothers before departing for combat. These are men willing to die out of patriotic duty. Supported by their father, the courage and resolve of the brothers is evident even in their taut and outstretched limbs. Here, men are seen as moral symbols of the highest virtues, while the women are relegated to sit home, weep, and wait. The mothers and sisters, wrapped in soft, pliant draperies, seem to melt into tender gestures of suffering.
David's great pictures show us how the classical tradition could be used not for the academic or the picturesque, but as a model for political action. These are moral fables, dramas with their austere heroism, their severe sacrificial devotion to the ideal of the state. No wonder that some people went so far as to blame the cult of classical antiquity for helping bring the revolution about. And nothing better demonstrates the connection between this art and the politics of the time than an extraordinary event which took place only months into the revolution, when Voltaire's old play on the life of Brutus was revived at the National Theatre. At the end, David's picture of Brutus was enacted as a tableau vivant. When Brutus cried, "Gods, give us death rather than slavery," the roars and applause of the audience were so great that it was minutes before order was re-established. Never, said an eyewitness, was the illusion more complete. The spectators became so many Romans. They believed they had participated in the action.
All the great themes of this tumultuous epoch come together in David's painting of the Oath of the Tennis Court. This great declaration of the rights of man in June 1789 was the symbolic beginning of the revolution. Men are born free, the deputies swore, and shall remain free and equal in rights. David himself was deeply committed to the revolution, a member of the National Convention, and he was the obvious choice to paint it. For him, this was contemporary reportage. But the gestures belong to those nerveless Roman heroes, the Horatii. In the tennis court, then, David showed the spectators had indeed become the actors, become new Romans. As a fellow deputy said, to paint this moment, we have chosen the painter of the Horatii, this patriot whose genius anticipated the revolution. Unfortunately, their high ideals were not destined to last long.
Vive l'Assemblée nationale! Vive l'Assemblée nationale!
During those first radical years, David devoted his art to the new republic. One of his friends and heroes was Jean-Paul Marat, the journalist. This friend of the people came to a violent end. He was murdered in his bathtub by his political enemy, Charlotte Corday.
The day after Marat's death, a deputation appeared in the National Convention to offer regrets on behalf of the people. One of the deputies made a speech which is recorded by a contemporary of David, the historian Delacroix. What a crime is this! A parricidal hand has robbed us of the people's most determined defender, a man who died for liberty. We still look among you, expecting to see him here, among you, our representatives. What a spectacle it was, this man in the moment of his death. Where are you, David? You have another picture to paint. And David spoke up, his voice choked with emotion. Yes, I will undertake it.
David painted the picture in 3 months. The Death of Marat is a murder story, and we see all the clues to the murder. The blood, the knife, the letter Marat received from Charlotte Corday just before she murdered him. It's a very realistic picture, strongly, movingly realistic. But it is more than that. It has an almost religious intensity, like a secular Pietà, an icon to a martyr for the cause of freedom. In painting this, David created perhaps the greatest single image of the revolution. Now, finally, the age of reason lost its nerve. Soon after Marat's death, David watched from a window in the Place de la Révolution while Marie-Antoinette went to the guillotine. He left us a poignant and eloquent sketch. The murder of thousands followed in the purge known as the Terror. The frailty of reason was tragically exposed, and as so often in history, fear of worse disorder led even reasonable men like David to turn to a strong leader to solve their dilemma. The man they thought their savior was Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1815, in the aftermath of Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo, Tsar Alexander of Russia visited Paris and saw the Vendôme column crowned by its imperial statue of Napoleon. Were I to be so highly elevated, he quipped, my head would surely spin with vertigo. Even the Tsar could not imagine such dizzying heights of glory. But, as he added, the higher you climb, the harder you fall. And what heights Napoleon fell from. In those brief few years, he led French armies to Italy, Egypt, Spain, Austria, Prussia, and even Moscow itself. And during that meteoric time, this room, his library at the Chateau of Malmaison, was his still point, the place to which he could return. It was here, for example, that he worked on his famous law code, the Code Napoleon, at this desk, the desk painted by David. Here he returned after his abdication in 1814, in such despair that he'd attempted to commit suicide. He came back once more to meditate during the fateful 100 days before Waterloo. And after that last catastrophic defeat, the English allowed him to return here just once more before his final exile to distant St. Helena. The house was empty then. His former wife, the Empress Josephine, whose house it was, had died. She had kept this room exactly as it had been during their happiest moments together. Here, Napoleon had enjoyed moments of his greatest triumphs and moments of his greatest creativity. For in the story of art, too, Napoleon was an extraordinary catalyst, not merely in the pictures that he commissioned or inspired here in France and in the Empire, but throughout Europe, for everywhere artists were touched by his aura.